Good evening, my friends. I hope you enjoyed our first tale, The Laugh. But compared to the one I'm about to tell you, it might seem tame. Indeed, we're about to delve into things that, I believe, embody universal elements of fear. The night, an old abandoned farmhouse in the countryside, and a very peculiar scarecrow. So, if you're ready to keep your eyes wide open through the night, lock your doors, turn off the lights, and listen to this story from our channel, Faceless Terrors. A distant glow caressed the cornfield. The school year was coming to an end. Packed in a convertible car, a noisy group of high schoolers parked on the old dirt road leading to the abandoned farm. All around them, as far as the eye could see, were dry and sun-damaged corn stalks, a deserted and isolated place in the deep countryside. A perfect backdrop for a carefree evening. Once settled, the teenagers brought out a barrel of beer and cranked up the music, causing a few nightbirds to take off. The moon was half full, and a few clouds veiled its crescent. The teenagers danced, they sang, they joked, and they laughed heartily. The evening went on in this joyful and light-hearted atmosphere until one of the teenagers, Steve, a bold and unpredictable captain of the American football team, had his attention drawn to a silhouette rising in the distance in the field. Intrigued, he approached. It was a scarecrow, a straw mannequin clad in overalls, farm shoes, and topped with a farmer's hat. Its arms had been replaced by two rusty rakes. Steve saw an opportunity. Amy, his girlfriend, had followed, wondering what he was up to, and at the sight of the scarecrow, her heart skipped a beat. "We better head back to the car," Amy said, but Steve smiled. "I have a better idea." So Steve tiptoed and unhooked the scarecrow from the pole it had been hanging on for decades and swirled the straw doll into a frenzied dance. "Want to dance, sweetheart?" Steve asked, eliciting laughter from the other teenagers, but not from Amy. Indeed, the young girl was uneasy, and the scarecrow's appearance frightened her. It seemed both grotesque and feeble, but also very real, as if it wasn't a doll, but a man left to dry in the sun for years. Eventually, the rhythm of the night slowed down. The teenagers departed. Steve was too drunk to put the scarecrow back, and Amy was too afraid to do it herself. In the end, no one cared to leave the straw doll face down on the old farm road. After all, who would blame them? The next night came. Amy had spent the day at the mall with her friends, discussing the upcoming prom, contemplating the dress she would wear for the occasion. She finally returned home, exhausted by the previous night's events and her day of shopping, and went straight to bed, sinking into a deep sleep, until she was awakened. In the hazy ocean of her dreams, she thought she heard a noise. Drowsy, she opened her eyes, then sat up. The noise was very real. It was there, very close. Not in her room, no, but just outside. Yes, it came from the lawn, right in front of her parents' house. Under the moonlight, a feeble and grotesque silhouette wriggled in place. It was the scarecrow from the old farm, and it was dancing, yes. It was performing a sort of macabre jig to the rhythm of the night wind. It danced as if it were on a dance floor with thousands of people watching. Suddenly, it stopped abruptly. Amy wanted to dive under her covers, but she was literally paralyzed with fear. Then the scarecrow turned its head slightly, again and again, until it was completely turned around, and its two green eyes were glowing in the night, and they were looking at her. They were looking at Amy and seemed to say, "Do you want to dance, my pretty?" Finally, Amy rubbed her eyes. It was a dream, just a dream, and she would wake up. She closed her eyes so tightly that she thought they might sink into her brain, then opened them again. The scarecrow was gone. Morning followed the night. Then the next night, the scarecrow did not appear. Eventually, days passed. Amy tried to get back to her carefree life. The shadow of the scarecrow continued to linger in the young girl's mind. Finally, the night of the prom arrived, and as this date approached, an increasing anxiety grew in Amy's mind. What if the scarecrow was waiting for her on the dance floor on prom night? What if it burst in, demanding that she dance with it? It was silly, of course. What she had seen the other night was just a dream, a hallucination. Then, an unshakable idea took hold of her throughout the day, to the point where she forced Steve to take her to the old abandoned farm. Why? She didn't know exactly. Just to see. Just to make sure the scarecrow was still there, in the position they had left it. But when they got there and explored the surroundings, Amy had to confront a terrifying truth. The scarecrow was no longer there. It was neither on its pole, nor on the old road, nor anywhere in the cornfield, as if it had left. "It's just a stupid scarecrow," said Steve. Come on, let's go home. I'm craving a cheeseburger and a milkshake." Amy went home reluctantly. The prom was the next evening. She had a horrible night. In her dreams, she saw the scarecrow's horrible face again, and watched it perform its terrifying jig in the middle of the street. So the next evening, her instinct drove her to do something she had never thought she would. She gave up going to the high school prom, an event most American high schoolers dream of for years, as the most magical moment of their schooling. She arranged for a friend to go with Steve and pretended to feel unwell to skip her turn. Her parents were out that night. She watched TV while eating popcorn, trying to distract herself with trivial shows. Finally, she felt her eyelids grow heavy. As she headed to bed, she realized she hadn't thought about the scarecrow all evening and felt better at that thought. She felt relaxed enough to fall asleep quickly, but only to wake up a few hours later. The night was pitch black now, and the feeling of anxiety she thought she had managed to master had become so strong that she thought her heart was going to explode. She sat up on her pillows and tried to calm herself by taking deep breaths. But just as she thought she was succeeding, she heard a noise coming from outside, a horribly familiar noise. So Amy got up and slowly approached the window, knowing perfectly well what was making that noise coming from the lawn in front of the house. But it wasn't the dancing scarecrow. It was much worse than that. Hanging on a street pole, crucified like a human scarecrow, stood Steve's emaciated and bloodied body, his face frozen in the most nightmarish agony. Amy didn't have time to comprehend what she was seeing, as a sinister silhouette emerged from the shadows of the room. A fleeting moonbeam revealed the grimacing face of the scarecrow, smiling with a malevolent grin, and its sepulchral voice echoed in the room. "Would you like to dance, my pretty?"